housing crisis for all the wrong reasons.
Australia is in the grips of a well-documented housing crisis.
Hundreds of thousands of people are on alert in Sydney tonight.
South Australia's seafood industry has been hit by the algae bloom crisis.
It's never been more expensive to build a house, according to new figures out today.
South Australia is battling through one of the biggest marine crises in the state's history.
The lucky country, a nickname Australia has proudly carried for decades, is now fading fast as economic cracks begin to show. Behind the postcard-perfect image of sun-soaked beaches, koalas, and desirable living standards is an economy on the verge of disaster. Housing is unaffordable, wages have stagnated, debt is spiraling, exports are weakening, and political leadership is in turmoil. You might not see it in the headlines, but the signs of collapse are all around. And if you live in Australia, you're likely feeling it firsthand. In this video, we'll break down what's really happening, using hard data and a clear look at what's coming next.
There are plenty of warning signs about the state of the economy. Stock and house prices are falling, interest rates are going up, and we all know the cost of living is sky high.
For decades, Australia was the envy of the world, a country that seemed to dodge every major financial bullet. When the 2008 global financial crisis affected economic giants worldwide, Australia was one of the few developed nations that avoided recession altogether. Fueled by a powerful mining sector, iron ore, coal, and natural gas were the lifeblood of the nation. Mining accounted for nearly 13.7% of the GDP and at one point over 60% of total exports. Much of it directly flowing to China. This trade partnership kept Australia's economy booming for over a decade.
Australia's trade minister is all set to meet his Chinese counterpart in Beijing. As the diplomatic relations stabilize between the two countries, China is Australia's largest trading partner with two-way trade in goods worth $195 billion in 2022, that is.
Cash was flowing and life was good, but that golden age did not last long. China is slowing down big time with the factories cutting down. They suddenly don't need as many raw materials as they used to, and guess who that hits hardest? Australia. Heavy reliance on China is now exposing deep vulnerabilities, and because Australia failed to diversify, it's now stuck. Growth is stalling. In 2023, GDP slowed to just 1.5%, barely above population growth. Meanwhile, inflation surged to a staggering 7.8%, the highest ever in over 30 years, prompting the Reserve Bank to aggressively raise interest rates 13 times since 2022.
The Australian economy does remain under a fair amount of pressure.
The pressure is mounting, and Australia's economy is struggling to breathe. These aren't isolated issues anymore. They've spread everywhere. The housing, unaffordable for millions, wages falling behind with the rising cost of living, debt spiraling, politics stuck in a cycle of short-term fixes and leadership swaps. This isn't just a rough patch. It's the breakdown of a fragile system, a system that worked in the past but can't survive the pressures of today.
Authors of a new report into the rental market say Australia's housing crisis is the worst it's ever been.
If there's one place where Australia's collapse hit hardest, it's the roof over your head. The cornerstone of Australians' wealth has been real estate for far too long. The property ownership dream has turned into an insurmountable nightmare. Let's take a look at the numbers. The median house price in Sydney is about $1.59 million. In Melbourne, just under $1,003,000. With these figures, you can earn six figures and still be unable to afford a home. Teachers, nurses, police officers, even dual-income couples earning over $100,000 a year are being priced out of the market. Not just in Sydney or Melbourne, even in regional areas, the prices have skyrocketed by over 30% since 2020. And if you're thinking, I'll just rent for a while, good luck. Rent rose more than 10% in 2023, with some cities seeing even higher spikes. Vacancy rates are under 1.5%, and people are now bidding above the asking price just to secure a roof over their heads. On top of all this, interest rate hikes have hit homeowners like a freight train. Mortgage repayments chew nearly 48% of household income, the highest level on record. Families are cutting groceries just to pay the bank. Others are juggling multiple jobs just to hold on to their homes. And for thousands more, it's too late. Australian Bureau of Statistics records that over 122,000 people in the country are now homeless, living in cars, shelters, or worse. In one of the richest countries in the world, let that sink in. So, what caused this massive surge in prices? For too long, housing was treated like an investment game, not a human right, paired with cheap loans, not enough homes, and government handouts that boosted demand instead of fixing the problem. Like, this isn't a housing market anymore. It is a trap. And for most Australians, there's no way out.
Well, Australia has recorded its highest increase in public debt in the developed world. OECD data shows the gross public debt has increased from 15.2% in 2004 to 57.9% in 2024.
The housing crisis directly feeds into our next critical issue, the escalating household debt burden, particularly for young Australians. As of 2024, household debt sits around 112% of GDP and over 186% of disposable income, one of the highest among developed nations. That means for every $1 you take home, you probably owe nearly $2. The Reserve Bank has raised 13 times, and that cheap money from a few years ago, it's not cheap anymore. With these interest rate hikes, the average mortgage holder is now paying thousands more each year in repayments. Over 1 million households are under mortgage stress, spending over 30% of their income on repayments. Behind those stats are real people skipping meals, delaying doctor visits, or racking up more debt just to make ends meet. What's making it worse is the flatlining wages. Between 2021 and 2023, real wages in Australia dropped by 4.5%. In 2024, nominal wages grew by 3.5%, but inflation soared to 7.8%. This meant real gains were minimal at best, and the workers remain 4 to 5% worse off in real terms. Even with unemployment at historic lows, most new jobs are casual, insecure, or underpaid. Over 2.5 million Australians are now in gig or part-time work with no benefits and no stability. Families that once felt middle class are now living paycheck to paycheck or worse, dipping into savings and racking up debt just to survive. People aren't taking out loans to splurge, they're borrowing to survive. And it's not just mortgages. There are credit cards, personal loans, car loans, and the rise of buy now, pay later schemes. It's all piling up. Debt is climbing, wages are stuck, and hope is wearing thin. It's a warning sign, and the clock is ticking.
Australia thrust into political crisis by a shock decision to block its Deputy Prime Minister from Parliament. The country's High Court ruling found Barnaby Joyce ineligible to remain in office. The reason for the decision, Joyce's dual citizenship.
You'd think with all these crises, strong leadership would rise to meet the moment. Instead, the Australian political landscape has become a cycle of empty promises and short-term fixes. And in the past 15 years, there have been 7 different prime ministers, each promising action, few delivering anything that lasts. Every new leader resets the agenda, while the real problems keep getting worse. Real reform has been replaced, press releases, and temporary patches. Take housing, for example. Rather than building affordable homes, the response has mostly been first homebuyer grants, which have inflated demand and pushed prices even higher, or tax policies. The system rewards investors with tax breaks like negative gearing and capital gains discount, while average Australians fight for scraps in a rigged housing market. When it comes to wages, the government has done little to set wage growth targets that keep up with inflation. And while Australians drown in buy now, pay later debt, credit regulation remains lax with no meaningful protection for vulnerable households. Even more worrying, Australia continues to bet big on old export models even as global demand shifts. While China is cutting back on construction and manufacturing, the country's economic plan still leans heavily on digging up raw materials and hoping someone buys them. It's like driving toward a cliff with your foot on the accelerator and no one willing to grab the wheel. So is Australia beyond saving? It isn't, but time is running out. This is the moment to trade patchwork politics for bold, nation-shaping reforms. Housing must be tackled at the root by building large-scale public housing. Investor tax perks must be scaled back, and rent caps, no longer optional in this crisis. Homes are being treated like stocks, not shelter. And that's a huge part of what broke the system in the first place. Debt relief must be prioritized. Credit schemes should be regulated with targeted mortgage relief. Minimum wages need to rise above inflation. Secure, full-time jobs must be incentivized, and gig workers must finally be protected by law. And finally, the mining boom is running out of steam. It's time to invest in what's next: clean energy, tech, local manufacturing, and future-proof skills. Because digging up dirt won't drive the future. What comes next depends on whether the country chooses bold action or quiet decline. Because doing nothing, that's no longer an option. Australia was once called the lucky country, but luck doesn't last forever. The cracks are widening and the pressure is building, and without real reform, the collapse won't be a question of if, but when. So, what do you think? Is Australia headed for collapse? Can the government turn things around? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives.